2, 1. Welcome to Patron Familias, coming to you from Fairhope, Alabama.
I'm Todd Sylvester.
And I'm Stefan Sylvester.
When was the last time you used a caulking gun? Don't say never.
No, I have. I think it's been at least a year.
I think I've made up for all the caulking that I haven't done in my entire life. Caulking up the building that the studio is in. And we put batten strips, so it's board and bat. It's really nice. But I've gone through, thus far, over 2 cases of caulking. And
How many are in a case?
12.
Jeez.
And I'm about halfway done, maybe. It's going to be a 5-case job, 60 tubes of caulking.
Wait,
$150 worth of
why?
caulk.
Why do you have to use that much caulking?
You have to seal it all up. I mean, or I should say, you can just paint it and move along with your life, and then later on you're going to deal with rot because the batten strips that you're putting up are called hardy board.
Okay.
So it's a cement board, and when water gets behind it, it has a tendency to rot.
And see, I was wondering why this was taking a long time and was really intensive.
Yeah, you were like, Dad, what's your problem? Why aren't you done yet?
Don't you just have to
just paint it?
You just nail a bunch of boards to the wall and then you paint
it.
it. What's taking so long? Okay, that makes a lot more sense now.
Which is why when Mom walked outside and I was replacing the rotted wood, and she goes, this would look so much better with batten strips. And I went,
You're like,
right.
oh no.
No, I said, you're right. But I knew that it was going to entail all of this.
Well, why didn't you say can we wait till Christmas or something?
Because if you're going to do it, then do it. I mean, if there's no sense in just priming it and it having to be ugly, just the post-rotted spots.
It's only ugly if you feel that way.
No, it's ugly. Like, it's straight up ugly.
When it's
painted,
eye of the beholder.
Yeah, and all of the beholders driving past our house
thought it was ugly. Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
There was a consensus.
Yeah.
100%.
You took a poll?
Of the studio audience.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
Indeed. All right. Punch it up. Let's do this thing. Oh, we got something to say today. Important things. Very important things.
Jace, we're going to get canceled again.
It's the main thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Many times people will pay us incredible compliments. They'll come and they'll say, Todd, we just love your kids. And I say, yeah, I'm with you 100%. They said, okay, so what are some of your secrets? Everybody thinks it's a secret.
Yeah.
Just like I remember talking to somebody that lost a lot of weight one time, this is many years ago, and I said, what's your secret? And he goes, there's no secret. I'm eating 1 meal a day. I am starving myself.
Yeah.
I'm like, whoa, I don't know if that's the healthiest way to do it, but quite frankly, it was working for
I was
him.
going to say, obviously, it's effective.
Obviously working. So they'll ask, what are some of the secrets? And I guess there are some things with our children in rearing y'all that were not as evident, let's say, on some direct things. Like they would watch the way that we would discipline, or they would watch the way that we would affirm. But there are certain elements, certain things that they might say, well, I just never saw that. I didn't see exactly what you're doing. I think it's very important when you're rearing children that you have to deal with what I call the big stones.
Okay.
And I use that as a reference because on a retreat one time, they had a guy and he had this big jar, glass jar, and he dumped out on the table, or I guess it was in a container, a bunch of sand, and then they had some rocks and then some bigger rocks, and then he had 3 big stones. And he said, all right, put everything in the jar. And most people were like, it doesn't fit. It won't fit because they're dumping everything in, and then they're trying to fit everything in, and it was overflowing, and it just didn't work. And the only way that it would work physically is you had to put the big stones in first. And then you did the next size stones, and then the smaller ones, and then you did the sand slowly, and you have to shake the whole thing. And it was perfect. I mean, right up to the line. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But that reference made me think, okay, there are big stones that you consciously have to make sure that you're giving these to your kids. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And you may not remember this. You were the hardest one to give this stone to. This most important thing, because you were the first. And it was hard to let you, like that first time that you drove off by yourself. The first time, it got easy because you're a very good driver. A little fast.
I was going to say, I'm
little-
more like mom than I am like you, I think, when I drive.
But even mom's a good driver. She just drives faster than me.
Yeah.
So I wasn't necessarily concerned. And I was like, make sure that you're paying attention to the road and all that kind of stuff. But the one thing that I found to be incredibly important to give to our children was independence. Independence. And let me use a caveat with this, though. I don't mean hyper independence. Like I get ridiculed or branded as having lone syndrome or lone ranger syndrome. And I get that. There are times, like there was even one time, and I've mentioned this before, I think, in the podcast, I moved a piano by myself. And it's not a smart thing to do.
Nope, not if you don't want hernias.
And I did pick up an upright piano and put it on my back by myself.
Jeez, when was this?
This was many, many years ago. Like I was in my 20s, and I realized that, this is back before YouTube, but I saw in a movie or something where this guy picked up a piano. Those handles that are on the back of an upright piano are perfectly placed so that you can put the piano on your back. And I thought, I can do this. And I did. I picked it up and I walked with it across the room because there was no way. I
Did
didn't
you blow
have a
out
dolly
one of
or
your
anything like that.
knees or anything? Or?
No. And I probably should be in more pain today because of that.
I was going to say, just that one thing was probably enough to weaken all of your tendons and joints.
So that wasn't smart. That wasn't smart. And there are times when you really do need help.
Yeah.
And I'm not good at that. I'm not good at asking for help. I'm not good at accepting when people offer. I got this is normally my phrase.
I think you're in the club with most men in that way.
Yeah, it's like, I can do this. I'm not asking for directions.
Yeah, or for help.
Right. But independence, though, today I've found a lot of young people, they won't even venture. They won't like try things out. And I don't know whether it's a fear of failure or a fear of the unknown or just not diving in.
It's probably a combination of things. I mean, you have to think about the differences in upbringing between your childhood and my childhood.
Okay.
And then I'm an older millennial, so I was one of the last generations to get the benefits of growing up in the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. And then after that, everything changed. And that's why we see a lot of, I don't want to use the phrase kids these days, but a lot of younger people in this day and age. That's basically just the same thing. But all right, look, I'm just going to embrace it. Kids these days are
You sound like an old man.
You kids these days. But,
Get off my lawn.
But seriously, I see your point, and I know exactly what you're talking about from doing youth ministry, because I see a lack of not just initiative, but even knowing how to take initiative in their lives. And so I think it's for a couple of reasons. So you grew up in a day and age when danger was way more present in people's childhood upbringing than it is now, right?
But you have to explain the type of danger that
So
we're talking
not danger in terms of like everyone was going to water parks that weren't rated for safety. That's not what I mean. Although that did happen in the 70s and 80s too. But I mean more so in the sense that parents sort of assumed like, well, there's a lot of things that we can't control in what our children are going to get into and how they're going to spend their time. So we're going to accept a certain level of not knowing where they are every second of every day, especially as they get to be teenagers, and teaching them things that they need to know, or at least, like, if not teaching them, then making them aware somehow of certain principles about life that will help them to be successful in those instances. Whereas when I was growing up, we've talked before on the podcast about how we were a little sheltered. I don't think we're nearly as sheltered as, because if you say sheltered, then people think that you're talking about
we were Amish,
or you're in a cult or something.
Yeah,
and I definitely was not that level of sheltered. But we've talked about not going to sleepovers, not going to dances. There were a lot of things that were not a part of my life growing up that could have been opportunities for me to go out and gain some independence. But I think that all things considered, I turned out pretty well rounded. So I don't feel that same. I don't feel the same lack of initiative that I see in people that are younger than me, and so I don't think that that was an issue. Now, what I think is happening is that the people that are about 10 to 15 years younger than you and mom are now getting to the point where they are raising young teenagers, right? So what I see happening is there are fewer and fewer natural opportunities for their children to go out and experience not dangerous situations necessarily, but situations where a certain amount of independence is required. And what I mean is, think about the ways that people's lives are changing right now. You can get whatever you want from Amazon delivered right to your door.
Yeah.
You don't, and
The drones are coming soon.
especially now because of the pandemic, it's accelerated all this stuff. So we're just going to see it get worse.
Yeah.
People are becoming more and more insulated in the particular ways that they are choosing to live in modern luxury. So it's not luxury in the sense of everyone is living like a king, unless you're comparing it.
Yeah, I was going to say,
unless you're comparing
to a lot of the world.
Well, yeah, comparing it to 100 years ago, then yeah, everyone is living like a king, especially in the U.S. But, and again, I know that's a gross generalization. Leave me alone in the comments. But
Get him!
I'm aware that it's a generalization. I get it. However, I think that because we're insulating ourselves from all ways that you used to have to accept a certain level of danger or at least independence that was necessary to go out and experience life,
Right.
you're losing that that natural way that kids would learn how to do that stuff. Because there were certain times where I just had to figure it out for myself. Like if we're at the
Welcome
park,
to life.
Exactly. So if we're at the park, I'll give you an example that I saw directly happen just a couple of weeks ago. So when I was little, if I was at the park, if a kid pushed me over, I had two options. I could either sit there and cry and run to you guys and be like, hey, kid pushed me, help, you know?
I don't ever remember you doing that.
Right. And you know why? It's because I didn't think that that was an option. So what I could do was either punch the kid, which I would sometimes do, or just get up and be like, all right, I'm just going to avoid you and go back to doing what I was doing.
I'm not playing with him.
And so I
remember you saying that to me one time. I'm not playing with him.
I'm not playing with that kid. That kid sucks.
Well, no, you didn't say that.
Well, because I wasn't old enough to, but that's in little kid terms, that's what that means, right? And probably
you're
some
not
other
invited
words.
to my birthday party.
But my point is that it was required that I was going to be put in situations where I would have to make those calls, right? And there was no way for me to come to you and mom and be like, hey, that kid did something to me that I don't like. Can you please do something to that kid that he doesn't like?
Right.
And I saw that exact situation go down with, we didn't know these people, but we were at the park and we saw this exact situation happen. So obviously when we're at the park with all of our kids, we have to watch them all like hawks because we have 4 kids and there's only 2 of us. So, and Sam has this tendency to, like, if he sees something that's like dangerous and potentially harmful, you know, like a street, he just like takes off toward the thing. And
my grandson.
The other kids never did that. Our other kids tended, and we can also do this where, like, from about the age that Sam is for all the rest of our kids, we could go like, hey, and they would listen and they would stop. Sam hears us because he turns around and he just goes and runs faster. So we really have to watch them.
That's probably my genetic matter.
That's okay. It's great. I love it. I'm just like, man, you're going to be like a stunt person or something.
And let's also make sure that we don't want anyone to seriously get hurt.
Of course
we don't want our children or our grandchildren to get seriously hurt.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. When I'm talking about danger, what I mean is situations where there is the potential for danger. I don't mean dangerous situations in and of themselves. So, like letting my daughter, who's 4, climb all the way to the top of the stuff at the park that you can play on, because there's 3 levels and there's a big giant slide you can go down. There's no railing up there. If she were to take a step off onto the side that has the rock climbing wall, then she would fall straight to the ground. So I have to trust that she is old enough to pay attention and not do that. But, you know, I also make sure that I'm close enough to where if she really did take a fall, then I could hopefully run up and catch her in time. Right. So, but I understand that that's part of her experience of learning boundaries, and that's part of her growth and development. So anyway, all of this stuff was to say, we saw this thing happen at the park where a slightly bigger kid pushed down another kid, not our kids, and that smaller kid ran over to his parents, who then immediately went over and talked to the parents of the other kid and made them both sit down and like talk about it. Now, there's nothing wrong with that on the surface, but it is completely different from the experiences that I had when I was growing up that I can remember. And you can probably correct me about this because you were there. I never saw a reason to go and talk to y'all about some kind of injustice that happened at the playground. I would always just sort of deal with it because that's what was expected of me to do.
But it would have been different if somebody really like round off and blasted you.
Oh
or
yeah,
something.
no. If I was getting beat up,
He
that's
hit
different.
me with a pipe, something
Yeah,
like that.
but if we're
When a
just
kid
talking about
pushes,
playing,
I'm sorry.
it's like what do you want me to do?
Yeah, it's like
Because-
they're 3 years old or they're 4 years
If-
old, and they're fighting over who got to the swing first. Someone's gonna push.
If I had come to y'all and said that kid pushed me, you would have been like, okay, sorry.
Okay, go play.
Like, and it's not because you were being indifferent. It's because you were like, what do you want us to do exactly? Like, you can't protect us from all of that stuff.
Because sooner or later, it's going to get to a point where you're going to have to send them off. And I think that's the thing that really gets me with a lot of these kids that are supposed to be ready to launch, and they are not ready.
Yeah.
They are going through anxiety attacks. I know people that are on anti-anxiety medication, which I'm not putting down.
Right,
I'm just
there's nothing
saying,
wrong with that.
But it just seems like, what's the cause of the anxiety? I'm going to college. It's like, well, okay, but it's trying to live that life. Now, I will say I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth right now, because there were things that your grandparents, my parents, let me do that I wouldn't let y'all do.
Yeah, and I think the same is true. Like, there were things that you would let me do that I would never let my kids do.
Right.
And it's not like a ton of things, but it's definitely some things where I made a choice about that with how to raise my kids versus how I was raised. So there's nothing wrong with that.
And I even remember your sister getting mad because we had a double standard between you and her. She was the number 2 child, and you being a guy, I was like, yeah, I think it's safer for him to be able to go out and do this. She's like, well, that's not fair. And I'm like, you're right. It's not fair. It's not equal. You're a young woman, and you can't be out by yourself at that hour in that safe environment. So it's creating that environment.
Yeah, and this is all of these are judgment calls. It's not like these are tried and true standards that everybody has to follow, but it's important to consider this stuff. So I also want to make clear that there's actually a double-sided edge here. And what I mean is, it's important to let your kids experience situations where they have to practice the principles that will help them be independent. That's a really important thing. But something that I see when I'm playing music is there are many, many parents, and I've talked about this too with the parents who have the iPad and they'll just stick it in front of their kids, and that's how they get them to shut up and be quiet every time they're in a public place. I also see the parents who literally sit at a table for 3 hours and get drunk and let their kids do whatever they want.
Whoa.
I see this like frequently.
Wow.
And it's not something where I feel like they're in danger necessarily. I don't feel like I need to call CPS on them, but I watch as their kids run around a restaurant with basically no supervision. And if the manager of the restaurant or if one of the servers comes over and says, excuse me, like, your kids are getting in the way of the people that are trying to bring food to the tables and screaming, and we have customers that are leaving because of this, and they'll kind of say like, hey, stop that. And that's the extent of what they do.
Wow.
So there's definitely two sides to this.
Yeah.
And there's extremes on both ends.
I wouldn't call that authentic independence. I would just call that, you're allowing your child to be annoying.
Right, but you want to make sure that you're clarifying here, because just like in all things when you're talking about parenting, there's a balance.
Right.
Because you can give your kids way too much independence, and I think I would call that
freedom. That's unbridled freedom, and that's not what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Independence, like recently we had a young adult who got close to our family, and he came to me and he said, Todd, you seem to be a pretty handy guy. Do you have tools? And I said, what kind of tools are you looking for? Of course I have tools. And he wanted some woodworking tools because he wanted to build a boat. And so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I do.
And I was like, yeah, I've got everything you need. So he said, do you mind if I basically moor, is the term that he used, dry dock at your house while I build this boat? Because I knew it was going to be a number of weeks. And I said, absolutely. He never asked for my help. A couple of times he said, do you mind if I use these screws? And he'd take a photo with his phone. And I said, you can use anything you want. Don't break it. If something happens, let me know, and make sure you put everything back where it belongs.
Yeah.
Never had a problem. Never had an issue.
See, that's awesome.
He wasn't asking for help. He got online a couple times because he had some questions about the epoxy that he was using or the type of paint that he was using. He built himself a boat, took it out on Mobile Bay, and just went out with his boat and was having the time of his life. And now
awesome.
I know exactly where it's dry docked too, because he kept it down in this area. That's what I mean by independence.
Mm-hmm.
He did not need, like, I don't want to do this unless I'm doing it with somebody or having some kind of other inspiration. He just got the wild hair. I'm going to build a boat.
Or having somebody do it for him, which is what happens now, right? So when you're talking about independence, you mean like particular ways that people help themselves.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that makes a lot more sense. I thought you were just talking about freedom, generally speaking.
No, because the freedom, people think that they can just run wild. That's not what I mean. Independence is the type of... Look at the biggest entrepreneurs, especially in recent history.
Oh, yeah. That's like the number one principle,
they
right?
Just go. They just go. They're like, all right, let's just do this. They're not waiting for somebody else. Yeah, they're not waiting for someone else. They get the inspiration and then they act on it. That's independence.
Yeah.
That's just going, all right, I'm not going to wait for anybody here.
You know what's interesting is I wouldn't consider myself like a huge entrepreneur, but I have built a pretty successful business, like branding myself as a musician. Excuse me. And what I noticed is that in a lot of ways, I was sort of waiting for someone else to do certain parts of that for me. Like I was like, man, wouldn't it be great? When I first started out, I was like, I just can't wait to get discovered by a label. And what I meant was, I can't wait for someone to do all the work for me.
Right.
And that's what a lot of artists are saying. Now, I'm not knocking, obviously it would still be really nice to have, if a big label reached out and they're like, hey, we want to offer you like money to make an album and put you on tour or whatever. That'd be cool. But a lot of the things that I was waiting for, you actually can do yourself. In fact, you're able to do way more of that stuff yourself today than you ever could before. And it took me a while to realize like, oh, I really can just make all these phone calls myself. And I really can just make at-home recordings that are pretty good myself and watch YouTube videos and figure out how to do it. And I really can just build a website myself and do all this other stuff. And I'm not tooting my own horn here. I'm just saying that the opportunity is there. All you have to do is decide that that's what you want to do. So I think the principle is teaching your kids how to recognize the ways that they can help themselves, more so than pushing them to do it. It's like you just need to recognize that if you have the wherewithal, if you have the willpower, then you can pretty much do whatever you set your mind to.
And what I caution is not only the whole pushing yourself, but doing it for them.
Yeah.
That is the danger zone. I have seen this with parent after parent after parent where I had a dad come to me one time and say, I can't believe that he only got a B in English because I wrote all of his papers.
Wow.
He said that out loud to me. I'm like,
oh, wow.
What are you doing? Wow. What are you doing?
And also, like, that's kind of sad.
It's just so wrong on many different levels.
Yeah.
So creating a child that is independent, to me, that is one of the big stones. Super important is setting them up so that they can launch. Because sooner or later, they're going to leave the house. I do have some friends that it's obvious they never wanted their kids to leave.
Yep.
And boy, do they have some psychological issues. They're going to need counseling for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everyone is going to be in that boat. That's only that one extreme family. And then on the other side, I don't want you to necessarily be like what Stefan was describing, where it seems like you don't care about your kids. You just let them do whatever. I don't know where they are. They've been gone for 3 days.
You shouldn't be apathetic about their freedom, for
Correct.
sure.
But it's creating an environment where they know they have, self-assuredness, where they recognize their gifts, they recognize their strengths, and then they launch. They go because they have to. They have to leave eventually, people. They have to.
I agree. I think that
Now, did you want to talk about a big stone also?
Well, mine was going to be trust, but it actually ties into this. Okay. So I think that for me, like you know this because I've talked with you about this, that my biggest criticism with the way that my teenage years went with discipline and figuring all this stuff out that we're talking about was I felt like because there were certain specific things that I wasn't allowed to do, that it was because of a lack of trust. Now, I know, looking back now with 2020 hindsight, I understand why you made those decisions. I get it. And I actually really appreciate the fact that you did.
You're welcome. Now, you do have to also recognize that it was a lack of trust, not in you, but in the world.
But in everyone else, right? But here's the thing. Like, I get it. And so I don't fault you for that. I don't want to go back and change anything about that part of my upbringing.
Especially since we can't. I don't have a time machine.
Right. No, but even I know that. But I'm saying that I don't have this nagging desire to go back and change any of that stuff, which is good. That's healthy, right? It took me a while to get here.
Amen.
And having said that, I'm very conscious of not allowing my kids to feel that way as much as I can as they get older, but knowing that there are going to be some decisions that they won't understand in the same way, and they will probably have the exact same criticism. Like, Dad, you don't trust me. And I can say, well, at this time, there's nothing that I can say to you that will change your mind about this. So, fair enough, kid.
Fair enough.
But you know what I mean?
But
like,
get ready to launch.
It's important to understand where to draw those lines and be willing to accept that particular criticism from your kids if you know that you're protecting them in an important way, right?
Yeah.
And that's a really difficult thing to do as a parent. I'm already seeing this with my 4-year-old, right?
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
It really is, because sometimes I'll picture, and this is weird, but I used to picture how oftentimes the things that we were doing in raising y'all and in preparation was almost like we were cranking down the, what do you call the big old weapon, the
trebuchet?
Yeah, but
Catapult? Yeah.
Is just the more known term. And like we were cranking down the
Yeah,
catapult.
sorry. Too niche, everyone.
Yeah. We were cranking down the catapult, and so many parents, when the child is ready to launch, they have a parachute on their child that's already open. And it's like, that's useless, because you launch them and immediately they go like 3 feet and then they fall. It's like, no. It's okay for them, excuse me, to have a parachute, but it shouldn't be something that's already open.
Right.
And let them pull the cord when they are going to pull the cord. And this is hard. It's so hard as a parent, because you do have to send them out into the world. And I remember the first time Mom and you were gone and you didn't call, or you didn't let us know what was going on. And of course, the first thing Mom said, he's dead. He's dead. I know he's dead. And I said, I'm fairly confident that he's not dead.
Yeah.
Like, there's a really good chance that he's not dead. He's just really busy and he forgot to call. So,
yeah. Although in fairness to Mom, I was horrible about keeping in touch with y'all initially.
It's all right. It's all good. You know, what was a blessing is, since you were first, we were busy with a lot of the other kids. So it got us distracted enough to let you live your life.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff. All right.
Indeed.
Independence.
Yeah. Let them be independent.
Let them be independent.
As much as you can.
Indeed. If you'd like to, please, if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe.
That would be awesome.
Please like this video.
Share it if you feel like it.
Share it. And
if you want to get exclusive content.
Yes. Then down in the description, you can hit the link to become a patron. It's $5 a month.
You get exclusive episodes that no one else gets, including music from me.
Indeed. Stefan always shares his music. But thanks so much for listening to Patron Familias. I was expecting you to say something.
I'm sorry. And we appreciate y'all. We didn't rehearse this. Thank you.